الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله.
I won't mention names as many people keep asking different questions, so I'll just read them out quickly without names. The first question is the sacrifice considered sunnah or is it actually wajib? You should note that according to scholars, performing the sacrifice is mandatory for every person who possesses sufficient wealth. While this specific issue was debated among the predecessors, some believed it to be an emphasized sunnah, whereas many others firmly held the position that it is obligatory. Even an emphasized sunnah is very close to being obligatory. However, the sacrifice itself is considered obligatory, and the clear evidence for this ruling is found in this authentic hadith of the Holy Prophet, PBUH. Whoever has the means to sacrifice but does not do so, let him not even come near our place of prayer. If a person possesses the financial means to offer a sacrifice yet deliberately chooses not to do so, he should not even come near our prayer ground. This serves as a very stern and serious warning for those individuals. Some people argue that Hazrat Abu Bakr and Umar, may Allah be pleased with them, did not perform the sacrifice, and the report states they acted out of fear that people might start blindly following their personal example as a mandatory rule. The response to this is that Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar, both of these companions were actually poor and needy, often wearing patched clothes. They chose not to sacrifice specifically so that people would not wrongly assume it was mandatory for the poor. Otherwise, looking at it in principle, how could it ever be possible for companions like Abu Bakr and Umar to simply abandon the sunnah of the Holy Prophet and to leave it just so that people would not start doing it? That would be quite a strange thing, as the Sahaba always strive to revive the Prophet's actions and traditions so that people would follow it. Abu Bakr and Umar Kadare did not perform it because people were extremely needy, not just poor but truly destitute. Had they done it, people would have thought it was mandatory for everyone. Then even poor people would take loans and face hardships just to sacrifice. That is why they didn't, but from Sahih Hadith we learn that the Prophet PBUH said, whoever had the means to sacrifice but did not do so, let him not even approach our place of prayer. While that issue remains a matter of disagreement among the predecessors, based on the evidence, this view is preferred. Furthermore, in matters of worship, the element of caution is always prioritized. The second issue is whether a sacrifice by the head of the house covers everyone. This too has been a point of debate among the predecessors. Some predecessors held the view that if the head of the household performs the sacrifice, it is fulfilled on behalf of the whole family. But regarding this, based on the same hadith, our position is that sacrifice is mandatory for whoever has the means. And the proof is this: whoever among you had the sufficient financial capacity and the required means to offer a sacrifice but purposefully chose not to do so, let him not even come near our blessed place of prayer on the very special day of Eid al-Adha itself. Anyway, it is a disputed matter. Extremism in this regard isn't right. Blaming or mocking either side, and those YouTube debate channels active nowadays are simply not good for the ummah. Therefore, true caution lies in the fact that whoever is capable of it should make every effort to perform the sacrifice as required by the law of Sharia. The second issue is regarding who must sacrifice. It is mandatory for the capable person known as the Sahib-e-Nisab. So who is a Sahib-e-Nisab? It involves 5 specific things. These include gold, silver and trade goods, meaning any items bought with the intent to sell and which are still intended for sale. And the fourth thing to consider is, namely, these items are gold, silver, liquid cash and trade goods. And the fifth very important thing you absolutely need to check and verify for yourself is, which is surplus items, those things not used all year round. For example, an extra plot you own which is neither rented out nor lived in, that is also surplus wealth. A house you have built which is neither rented out nor lived in is also counted as surplus. Similarly, a car you have that isn't used all year is also surplus. Even dinner sets kept in showcases and unused all year are surplus. So when you add up all these surplus items, gold, silver or specific cash amounts that you currently hold, or trade goods, if you have value equal to 52.5 tolas of silver, whatever the current price of 52.5 tolas of silver is, you can search for it. Rather, search for the price of 52.5 tolas of silver on 8 day. I think it is about 1.5 to 2 lakh rupees. Whoever has this much amount, from this total amount one should deduct any debts. One must subtract them along with essential expenses like household groceries, gas and electricity bills. Indeed, after subtracting all these necessary costs, if someone possesses wealth equal to 52.5 tolas of silver, sacrifice is mandatory. And for those who, even after these deductions, do not possess wealth equal to 52.5 tolas of silver, then the sacrifice is not required of them. Since women in our society usually own a lot of gold and also have some cash on hand, and since they have no debts nor are they responsible for providing the primary household groceries and daily food from their own personal pockets, as that is the primary responsibility of men, and men also pay the utility bills. Nowadays, the sacrifice often becomes more of an obligation for the women and less so for men because women have gold and Sharia has not burdened them with expenses, whereas men have many financial duties. In such a case, the sacrifice is mandatory for the woman. However, her husband may choose to perform it on her behalf, provided he has her explicit consent. If a husband performs the sacrifice for his wife and only informs her after the fact, the religious obligation for her will not be considered fulfilled. He must first tell her that he is sacrificing on her behalf. If she permits, it is valid, and her silence is also sufficient. Saying it verbally to the husband is sufficient, and even remaining silent when told is also sufficient. If the husband simply provides prior notice and she agrees, that too is enough. This was a brief explanation regarding the obligation of sacrifice. Now, a very important question is frequently asked by many people: what are the specific defects in an animal that would make a sacrifice completely impermissible to offer for the animal when purchasing it for the sake of sacrifice during the days of Eid? Many people often ask about the specific religious ruling on sacrificing an animal that has a broken horn or one that has no horns at all. See, whether the horn is broken or entirely absent from birth, the sacrifice of both of these types of animals is considered permissible. However, if you should find that the animal's physical horn was uprooted right from the root, causing a deep injury to its brain, then the sacrifice of such an animal is not permissible. Usually, in current times, people grind down the animal's horns for aesthetic reasons. The sacrifice of that animal is permissible. However, I have heard that when they grind the horns in this way or use heat on them to shape them, it causes the animal a lot of pain. Inflicting unnecessary pain on an animal is certainly a sin, but the sacrifice of a hornless animal is still permissible. If a horn breaks during a fight and is completely uprooted, thus affecting the brain, then its sacrifice is not permissible. What are the other defects to consider? Sacrificing a blind animal is not allowed in Sharia. If the sight of even one eye is completely lost, its sacrifice is also not considered permissible at all. Sacrificing a lame animal. Some people buy an animal that is lame. If it is so lame that it cannot even place its foot firmly on the ground, then its sacrifice is not valid. However, if it is lame but the leg at least enables it to walk by placing it down and being able to walking somewhat on its own, then its sacrifice is permissible. Sacrificing an animal with a cut ear or tail. There are various opinions, and some jurists have written that if 1/3 of the tail or ear is cut, then the sacrifice is not permissible. Another opinion suggests that if half is cut, then in our view, the preferred opinion is that if more than half of the ear or half of the tail is cut off, its sacrifice is simply not permissible. If, however, the portion of the tail or ear that is cut off is less than half of its total length, then its sacrifice is valid. Sacrificing an animal with damaged teeth. A cow has 4 teeth. If 2 teeth are damaged, then its sacrifice is not valid. However, if only 1 teeth is damaged, it is valid. A goat has 2 teeth. If even 1 teeth is damaged, the sacrifice is not considered valid. However, sacrificing a castrated animal is perfectly and entirely permissible. Sometimes it also happens that a question is asked regarding the testicles of the animal. If it only has 1 testicle, its sacrifice is still valid. Even if it was born without them entirely, it remains permissible to offer it. Exactly how weak must an animal be in its physical condition for its sacrifice to eventually become invalid? If an animal is so old or so physically weak that the poor thing cannot even walk on its own to the place where the sacrifice is to be performed, its offering is not valid. If you have to carry it on a stretcher or a trolley just to move it a mere 10 meters for the slaughter because it is that incredibly weak and frail in its legs and simply cannot stand, then the poor thing is already spent. Do not try to sacrifice it further. It must be able to walk to the slaughter place on its own feet. As long as it has the strength to stand and walk on its own, the sacrifice of such an animal is valid under Sharia. This question is also often asked by many people. Is it mandatory for 7 people to share a single cow for the sacrifice to be considered officially valid? First, let us address an important point. The sacrifice of a disabled animal is invalid, such as one that has a broken leg which prevents it from walking properly to the slaughter. A leg so broken that it cannot touch the ground. If an animal gets injured while being brought down for the sacrifice, please note that if such a physical defect occurs specifically at that time during the process, a defect occurs while bringing the animal down for slaughter, it does not matter, the sacrifice remains valid. Note that some bulls are very healthy, that when you are trying to bring them down, it has already knocked down 2 or 4 people, and then while bringing it down, if that bull's leg breaks or its eyesight is lost, then since it is a process occurring during the sacrifice itself, an action during the sacrifice, so it does not make any difference. Such an animal's offering sacrifice is also considered permissible. Related to this, another ruling is that some animals are very wild in nature. They simply do not come under your control at all, no matter how hard you try to hold them down or restrain them for the purpose of slaughter. So such an animal has to be shot first. You have to fire a bullet, after which it comes under control. So according to Sharia, this is also permissible, that if a strong, healthy bull or buffalo is not coming under your control at all, and if you shot it with a firearm and it did not die instantly from the impact of the specific bullet wound itself, but you immediately go and slaughter it with a sharp knife before it eventually dies from the gunshot, then its sacrifice is still considered permissible according to the religious law. However, if you shot it and it died from the bullet wound, specifically if it died before you could reach it to slaughter it with a knife, then now its status changes, meaning that sacrifice was not valid for you and that meat is not halal for you to eat. It is classified as carrion because the Holy Quran specifically mentions the al-mawquda. An animal that is killed by a heavy stone is considered forbidden. A bullet is also just like a stone. The only difference is that one specific stone is thrown by hand, while the other is fired through a mechanical device in order to increase its speed. However, if the bullet used is sharp-edged or has a pointed tip that can effectively pierce the skin, meaning it has a sharp, fine point just like that of an arrow, then when you hunt or catch a wild animal with any such sharp-edged object that penetrates the body of the animal, Sharia has granted us this great ease. If you fired that sharp-pointed bullet while reciting the sacred words Bismillah Allahu Akbar at the exact moment of firing your weapon at the animal, just any tip isn't enough. The round tips of standard gun bullets do not change the ruling. It must have a sharp, piercing edge, or if you have specifically shot a sharp arrow at the animal and as a result the animal falls down and it dies before you can reach it, even then it is considered lawful to eat. But this applies only when there is a sharp edge at the front of the bullet. Or if it was an arrow and the animal died before you reached it, then it is considered halal. If you reached it while it was still alive, then it is mandatory for you to slaughter it. Suppose you shot an arrow or a sharp-tipped bullet that has a pointed edge. After reciting Bismillah Allahu Akbar, you fired at the buffalo. You approached it and found it alive, but you wrongly thought that since you had used a sharp bullet or an arrow to strike it, you do not need to slaughter it manually. Then it becomes haram because you were actually required to slaughter that animal immediately with a knife. So the final conclusion is that common bullets from a rifle or a pistol do not have a sharp edge. If you use them to hunt an animal just to bring it under your control, then manually slaughtering it is absolutely essential in any case. It must be slaughtered before it finally dies. However, if you used a sharp-tipped bullet or a pointed arrow that is razor sharp, and if you reach the animal without being negligent, reaching it as soon as it fell and then slaughtering it before it eventually died, then it is indeed considered halal for consumption. But if it dies before you could slaughter it, it is still halal. However, if you were negligent and did not go over to it over there and let it die on its own while struggling in pain, then it is not halal to eat. This is exactly how it should be done, as in this day and age, some powerful and wild bulls are often extremely strong. They can terrorize the entire neighborhood before being sacrificed themselves. They might have already injured several innocent people. In such cases, the generous Sharia's allowances should be utilized instead of putting human lives at risk by shooting such dangerous animals with a firearm or gun so that they finally come under your full control for the purpose of the slaughter, are brought under control or lose enough blood so they finally collapse. There is no harm in doing this, and it should certainly be done if it is a necessity. Now, another very important question that is frequently asked by many people is as follows. Which animals are permissible for sacrifice? Is buffalo sacrifice also valid? What is the evidence? Or the yak, which is a wild buffalo in Chitral as it's called. I can't say much about wild ones. They are both wild and domestic. Is its sacrifice valid? You should understand this clearly. We are commanded to sacrifice 4 types of animals: the bovine species, including cows and bulls, and sheep, which include rams, goats, including both males and females, and finally camels. So sheep include both regular and fat-tailed varieties. As for the buffalo, there is no specific mention of this particular animal to be found in the authentic hadith. This is why some scholars nowadays have begun to say that buffalo sacrifice is not permissible, but historically there is a clear consensus on its validity. Now, as for that consensus, why exactly did the consensus of the Ummah occur that buffalo sacrifice is allowed? The reason is that among the 4 animals Sharia has commanded us to sacrifice, what is the common factor? One is that they are all quadrupeds. Number 2, they are domesticated and household animals. This is why the jurists reached a consensus in the past that the buffalo falls under the same ruling as the cow. Not medically but legally under Sharia it is treated like a cow. So the buffalo was not simply deduced by analogy from the cow. Rather, the buffalo was specifically categorized with the cow regarding sacrifice. It was included in the same species because it is also a 4-legged animal. Its basic benefits are exactly the same as those of a cow, the fundamental benefits, and it is domesticated, meaning it is not wild, it is a household animal. For this very reason, the sacrifice of wild buffalo is not permissible, and this also clarifies the ruling on the yak for you. If a yak is domesticated, its sacrifice is valid. If it is not a domestic animal but is instead wild and untamed, then its sacrifice is not allowed. So the conclusion reached is that buffalo sacrifice has an established consensus regarding its permissibility. Therefore, you can sacrifice a male buffalo, a female buffalo, and even a yak if it is domesticated. And goats and such are well known to everyone, so the sacrifice of these animals is also permissible. However, sacrificing deer or ostriches is not permissible because they are wild animals, and ostriches are not even classified as quadrupeds in the eyes of Islamic law. Similarly, the sacrifice of a markhor is not allowed, although it belongs to the goat species. They are not domestic but are instead considered to be wild animals. Therefore, sacrificing a markhor is not permissible. People also often ask this: exactly how old should the animal be for a valid sacrifice? Is having 2 teeth mandatory? No, it is not mandatory at all. For cows and bulls, they must be at least 2 years old. On the first day of Eid al-Adha, when you sacrifice, if you are slaughtering a cow or bull, it must have been born before that same specific time during the Eid al-Adha that took place exactly 2 full years ago from this day. At the moment you perform the sacrifice, they must be at least 2 years old by the Islamic lunar calendar and not by the solar one. For example, let us say if your cow gave birth to a calf at noon on the first day of Eid exactly 2 years before the current year started, then that calf's age is calculated from that specific moment in time until the moment you perform the sacrifice this year, specifically occurring at the time of noon during the Eid al-Adha celebration of the year before last. Then you cannot slaughter that calf on this current Eid morning because it has not yet fully completed its 2 years of age according to the lunar calendar. You can do it after Zuhr because after Zuhr on the first day of Eid al-Adha, it will have completed its 2 full years. From this example, you would have understood that every animal that was born before the Eid al-Adha, that occurred even before the last one we celebrated, you can sacrifice it during this current Eid regarding cows and bulls. And if it was born on the first day of the Eid before last, then on the first day after that time passes, or you can sacrifice it on the following day. And if it was born on the third day of Eid the year before last, you cannot sacrifice it on the first or second day. You will sacrifice it on the third day, after that specific time at which it was born, so that the 2 years are completed. This same ruling applies to goats as well. For a camel, it is absolutely necessary to be at least 5 years old. You cannot perform nahar or slaughter a camel before 5 years. For cows and bulls, it is 2 years. And for goats, it is 1 year. And for sheep, the actual ruling is that it be at least 1 year old. But if the lamb or sheep is healthy and well built enough to look like it is already a year old, even if it is only 6 months old, but looks like it is a full year old, looking like a year old means that if this specific 6-month-old lamb of yours were to be placed among them all, is placed among year-old lambs, and it becomes very difficult to distinguish whether it is a year old or not, then sacrificing such a lamb is also permissible. But if it is less than 6 months, then its sacrifice is not permissible. Or if it is 6 months old but is very thin and weak and does not appear to be a year old, then it is also not permissible. So this concludes the matter of the animal's age. Regarding the 2-year mark, 2 teeth is the standard people have set for themselves, because we often don't know if the person who is selling the animal is actually telling the absolute truth, is telling the truth, or simply lying to us. So when an animal gets 2 teeth, I believe in our local language they call such an animal a dondia. That is the common term used. That when the animal is 2-toothed, you are sure it's over 2 years old, as they only grow those teeth after 2 years. But this isn't mandatory if the animal is still khira in nature. If it has completed 2 years for a cow, 5 for a camel, or 1 full year for a goat, and the person selling you the animal at that specific time of the sale happens to be, you trust his integrity or are reasonably certain of his honesty, and he then swears a solemn oath in your presence saying, "Brother, I swear by Almighty Allah that it is completely true," then perform the